There are moments in life when a person enters your world quietly, almost harmlessly, and only later you realize how much their presence has shaped your moods, decisions, and even your sense of peace. In psychology, we pay close attention to these subtle shifts because people rarely reveal their true impact all at once. The Stoics knew this well. They believed that the quality of the people around you could determine the quality of your inner life. They warned that danger doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes wrapped in charm. As an old folk tale says, not every traveler at your fire is a friend of your journey. This introduction isn't about the signs themselves, only about understanding why noticing them matters before the damage becomes deep and silent. Stoic philosophy offers a powerful lens for examining the people we let into our emotional space. Unlike the modern impulse to diagnose every behavior, the Stoics focused on the effect that someone's presence had on your character and your ability to live with clarity. Epictetus reminded us, "You become what you give your attention to." That insight alone shows why the company we keep is not a small matter. It shapes the boundaries of our thoughts, our reactions, and our long-term well-being. Stoicism isn't about isolating yourself or becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about preserving the strength of your mind by recognizing when another person's influence pulls you away from your values, your peace, or your better self. So, before we explore any specific signs, we must ask the deeper Stoic question, the one that determines whether a relationship nourishes or drains you. What happens to your inner world when this person steps into it? That is the question we now need to unfold, because the answer will reveal why certain signs, once seen, must be taken seriously, and why stepping away may sometimes be the most courageous act of self-protection. If you followed the story this far, you're exactly the kind of mind that Stoic thinkers admired: curious, reflective, and unafraid to look beneath the surface of human behavior. So, before we dive deeper, take a moment to support this journey. Subscribe, like, and drop a comment sharing which part of the introduction resonated with you. Your engagement doesn't just help the channel grow, it creates a circle of thoughtful people who value wisdom, clarity, and honest conversation. Think of it as adding another log to a shared fire, keeping the discussion alive for everyone who seeks the same insight. Sign 1. Covert behaviors to control, mental manipulation. There's a certain kind of person who doesn't walk into your life like a storm. They arrive quietly, almost politely, the way fog creeps in before anyone notices the sky has changed. Psychologically, these individuals use subtle behaviors designed to shape your emotions without you realizing it. The Stoics, long before modern psychology existed, warned against those who disturb the soul with soft whispers. Seneca wrote, "What destroys us more are the unseen dangers." And that is exactly how covert manipulation works, not through loud commands, but through gentle pressures that reshape your choices and mindset. The Stoics didn't teach fear. They taught recognition. They believed that character reveals itself in patterns, and if we don't pay attention, we become part of someone else's script without ever agreeing to the role. In villages of old, elders told stories of travelers who carried a smile but left a shadow wherever they walked. Watch how a person moves, not just what they say, they warned. This wisdom mirrors Stoic insight. Actions, tone, silence, and timing can be more revealing than words. When someone quietly starts steering your emotions, the Stoics would say, it's time to step back and observe from a distance, because clarity often returns when space does. Stoic philosophy also teaches that manipulation thrives in confusion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." This means that if someone is constantly nudging your thinking, questioning your feelings, or shaping your reality, your inner world slowly begins to match their shadows instead of your own light. That's why modern psychology pays attention to subtle emotional shifts, changes in confidence, hesitation in your decisions, or a growing sense of walking on invisible eggshells. The Stoics valued calm, grounded minds, and they believed anyone who repeatedly disrupts that calm is not just unhealthy company, but a direct threat to your moral and mental stability. And before we move any further, the essential question rises like a drumbeat at the end of a dramatic tale. When someone's presence makes you doubt your own judgment, is that a relationship or a hidden leash? Answering that question opens the door to understanding the 6 signs ahead and why the Stoics insisted that sometimes the wisest, bravest choice is to walk away before the damage becomes part of who you are. Sign 2. Playing with emotions. Emotional manipulation. Some people don't try to control your actions. At first, they try to control your feelings. They pull invisible strings, adjusting your mood the way a puppeteer adjusts a marionette, all without raising their voice or showing their hand. In psychology, this is one of the most dangerous forms of influence because it doesn't feel like control. It feels like confusion. The Stoics spoke of these people as disturbers of the inner weather, those who make your emotional sky cloudy without ever touching the clouds themselves. Seneca warned, "He who unsettles your peace owns a piece of your mind," and emotional manipulators know this better than anyone. The technique is rarely obvious. It can be guilt one moment, sudden coldness the next, and a warm smile just when you begin to pull away. Like the old village stories of the peddler who sold dreams in the daylight and stole confidence at night, these people use your empathy as the very tool against you. The Stoics believed that the first sign of emotional danger is when your reactions stop feeling like your own. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on how swiftly the mind can be bent if we don't guard its doors, not by building walls, but by noticing who tries to slip inside without knocking. Stoic philosophy teaches that emotional stability is not a luxury. It's the foundation of a clear life. Epictetus wrote, "No person is free who is not master of themselves." Emotional manipulators prey on that mastery. They create small fractures, tiny doubts, sudden anxieties, unclear guilt, and do it in a rhythm designed to keep you unbalanced. Modern psychology sees the same pattern. The victim never knows whether to apologize, defend themselves, or stay silent. They simply know something feels off, like walking on a bridge that sways too much even when the wind is calm. The Stoics would say that any relationship that consistently bends your emotional stability is not a connection, it's a quiet battlefield. So, before we explore the actual signs, let the deeper question echo, like the final note of a tense cinematic score. If someone can shift your emotions at will, even subtly, how much of your life is still yours? That is the doorway we must step through next, because the answer reveals why emotional manipulation is not just harmful. It's a warning siren you should never ignore. Sign 3. Isolating tactics, separating you from your people. There's a kind of danger that doesn't strike loudly, it whispers. One of its softest, most deceptive whispers is isolation. A person who uses isolating tactics doesn't tell you outright to abandon your friends or step away from your family. Instead, they plant small doubts, quiet criticisms, or subtle guilt that nudges you away from the people who once strengthened you. The Stoics knew this tactic well, even centuries before psychology had a name for it. They believed that the strength of one's character grows within a community of wise, supportive individuals. Seneca said, "Associate with those who will make you better, and isolation begins the moment someone tries to remove you from such people." These tactics often appear innocent at first. Maybe they express concern about your closest friend. Maybe they insist they're the only one who truly understands you. Maybe they frame your loved ones as obstacles rather than anchors. Folk stories tell of wanderers who carried lanterns so bright they slowly dimmed the stars around their travelers, until one day the traveler realized they couldn't see anything except the lantern's glow. Isolation works the same way. It replaces your world with one person's shadow while convincing you it's light. The Stoics warned against losing your sense of belonging because they understood that wisdom grows in dialogue, not in silence, not in emotional captivity. To the Stoics, being cut off from your people was one of the greatest threats to your moral and psychological balance. Marcus Aurelius wrote that humans are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, and when someone begins to sever your natural connections, they aren't protecting you. They're positioning themselves as your only source of validation. Psychology sees the same pattern. The more isolated a person becomes, the easier they are to influence, control, or reshape. And the scariest part is that by the time many people realize what's been happening, they've already drifted far from the voices that would have warned them. This is why recognizing isolating tactics early is so crucial. So before we examine the actual signs, one haunting question must be asked. One the Stoics would have carved in stone. If someone is slowly leading you away from the people who love you, what are they planning to do once you're finally alone? That question opens the door to the truth behind isolating behavior and why stepping away might be the only way to protect your mind, your relationships, and your freedom. Sign 4. Contradictory and unpredictable behavior. Some people move through life like shifting shadows, warm one moment, cold the next, impossible to read even when they're standing right in front of you. Their unpredictability isn't just confusing, it creates an emotional tension that slowly rewires your reactions. In psychology, inconsistent behavior is one of the most destabilizing patterns a person can experience. The Stoics understood this long ago. They believed that a person's character should resemble a steady flame, not a flickering torch in a storm. Epictetus once remarked, "A sound mind chooses consistency," reminding us that instability in another person often becomes instability within ourselves. Contradictory individuals often appear in stories told around old firesides, tales of travelers whose faces changed with the wind, who would greet you with a smile and strike fear with a glance only moments later. These tales weren't meant to frighten, they were warnings. Unpredictability keeps you guessing, keeps you apologizing, keeps you trying to solve puzzles that were never meant to be solved. Stoic philosophy teaches that when someone's behavior constantly shifts, it's not your job to decode them, it's your job to notice. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the true nature of a person reveals itself not in their words, but in the harmony of their actions. Where there is no harmony, there is no trust. The emotional toll of unpredictable behavior is subtle but powerful. One day you're reassured, the next you're punished for the same thing you were praised for. You begin to question your intuition. You walk carefully, measuring every word, waiting for the mood to change like a sudden gust of wind. The Stoics believed that inner peace depends on being able to stand firmly in one's moral and emotional center, something that becomes nearly impossible when another person's instability becomes your daily environment. In modern psychology, we call this emotional volatility, and it often leaves people exhausted, confused, and disconnected from their own judgment. So before we reveal the actual signs, we must pause and ask the most important question, the question that separates temporary inconsistency from true danger. If a person's behavior constantly shifts, leaving you uncertain of who they'll be tomorrow, how long before you lose sight of who you are? That question will guide us into the deeper truth behind unpredictable behavior and why noticing it early can save you from a slow unraveling of your emotional clarity. Sign 5. Superiority complex. When someone thinks they are better than everyone. There's a certain type of person who walks into a room and seems to carry an invisible throne with them. Someone who acts as if the world is a stage built for their brilliance alone. This isn't confidence. It's not healthy self-esteem. It's the heavy, suffocating air of superiority. In psychology, a superiority complex is often a mask, an armor worn to hide deep insecurity. But to everyone else, it feels like being trapped under someone else's shadow. The Stoics were deeply wary of such personalities. They believed that true greatness was quiet, grounded, and humble. As Epictetus said, "The greater the man, the more he is gentle and humble." Superiority destroys that gentleness, replacing it with arrogance disguised as certainty. People with superiority complexes often show up in the old folk tales: the king who demanded silence at every meal so his brilliance could be heard, or the nobleman who mocked the villagers yet relied on their labor. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were warnings about people who live above others while contributing very little to them. Stoic thinkers understood that arrogance is not just unpleasant, it's morally corrosive. A person who believes they are above everyone else rarely sees their own faults, and as a result, they rarely change. They expect admiration instead of connection, obedience instead of respect, and slowly they train others to shrink around them. What makes this trait especially dangerous is its power to distort the emotional climate of any relationship. A superior-minded person doesn't argue to understand you argue, so they can win. You don't share ideas, you provide opportunities for them to lecture. You don't have conversations, you survive monologues. Marcus Aurelius warned against becoming entangled with those who praise themselves endlessly, because such people twist the balance of any interaction. Modern psychology echoes this truth. Superiority complexes suffocate communication, erode self-confidence in the other person, and create relationships built on hierarchy rather than equality. You start to feel small not because you are, but because someone needs you to be. Before we explore the deeper signs, we must pause and ask a single, unsettling question. A question that cuts through all the charm, intelligence, or confidence that may surround such a person. If someone truly believes they are above everyone, what place do they really think you hold in their world? The answer to that question reveals why this trait is not simply unpleasant, but a warning you should never ignore. Sign 6. Aggression. When anger becomes a weapon. Some people don't use manipulation, guilt, or charm to control a situation. They use anger. Not ordinary frustration, not normal human irritation, but a sharp, weaponized rage that forces everyone around them to bend, shrink, or retreat. In psychology, aggression is one of the clearest red flags that someone has learned to dominate rather than communicate. The Stoics saw this centuries ago. To them, uncontrolled anger was a kind of madness, a temporary loss of humanity. Seneca wrote, "Anger is acid. It does more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured." But in relationships, that acid spills everywhere: on trust, on safety, and on the emotional ground you stand on. Aggressive people often resemble characters in old village legends, figures who could turn a room silent with a single glare, or who made even the bravest men choose their words as if speaking near a sleeping beast. In these stories, the danger was never the loud threats. It was the unpredictability of the explosion. One wrong phrase, one misunderstood glance, one imagined insult, and the entire atmosphere changed. The Stoics believed that the measure of a person lay in their ability to remain steady, not in their ability to intimidate. A person who uses anger to control others reveals not strength, but deep inner imbalance. Psychologically, aggression reshapes the behavior of everyone around it. People begin to tiptoe. They avoid topics. They stay silent when they should speak. Over time, you learn to scan the emotional weather of a room before you enter, as if checking for storms. Aggressive individuals rely on this. They know that if their anger is powerful enough, people will adjust their entire emotional rhythm just to avoid setting them off. Marcus Aurelius warned about the tyranny of passions, explaining that when someone becomes ruled by rage, they try to rule others with it too. Modern psychology adds that living under constant threat, real or implied, can distort your sense of normal and make you forget what peace even feels like. Before we uncover the deeper signs of aggressive behavior, one crucial question rises, a question that every Stoic would demand you ask yourself. If someone's anger controls the room, the moment, and eventually your life, how long before it starts controlling you? That question marks the line between temporary temper and genuine danger, and understanding that line might be what protects your well-being before it's too late. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. You've walked through shadows, observed hidden behaviors, and faced uncomfortable truths about human nature. The Stoics teach us that awareness is the first step toward freedom. Seeing clearly the patterns that threaten our peace allows us to choose our path wisely. Remember, recognizing these 6 signs isn't about judgment or fear. It's about protection, clarity, and the courage to prioritize your inner life. As Marcus Aurelius said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Choose carefully who colors your world and never forget, sometimes the bravest act of wisdom is simply to step away.